Hey guys, welcome back to Roto Renovations, where today we're going to learn how to troubleshoot and repair a lawnmower engine. Here we go. The three things that are required for a small engine to run are fuel, air, and ignition, which is the spark plug in this instance. So first we're going to check and we'll see if it has any fuel in it, which it does. Check and make sure that the air filter is not clogged so that it can get air. And a way you can do this is just by leaving the filter off as you try and start it. And you can see that ours is pretty dirty. And then we're going to show you how to check the spark plug and see if that's any good. To test the spark plug, you can remove the spark plug, reconnect the spark plug cable, and have someone turn over the engine while grounding the spark plug against the engine with pliers. If you have a spark, you should be good. If not, replace the spark plug. After replacing the spark plug, if you still don't have a spark, check the magneto and the ignition module that sends the electrical current to the spark plug to see if rust is built up on either, preventing conductivity. If you haven't figured out the problem after checking to make sure you have good fuel, a free and clear air intake, and a working ignition system, go to the next step, which is a proper air-to-fuel mixture in the carburetor. Something I can't stand is pull starting an engine over and over, so before I continue to do more troubleshooting, I always remove the pull start and then use a drill to turn over the engine to save both time and energy. Another reason I use a drill before going to the next step is because if an engine's been sitting up for a while, it might just take more pulls to get the fuel into the carburetor and cylinder, and I'd prefer not to wear out my hands by using the pull start. Also, it frees up your hands to do more troubleshooting. For instance, I smelled fuel whenever I was testing the spark plug, so I knew that fuel was getting into the cylinder from the gas tank. If you didn't smell fuel, you could question whether the engine had both air and ignition but no fuel, and use one hand to turn over the engine with a drill and the other to block the air intake momentarily to create a vacuum, manually choking the engine to make sure that your fuel system was working. If it's still not starting, even with the drill, you'll be thankful that you weren't standing there trying to pull start it the whole time, and then you'll know it's time to go on to the next step. Now when this happens is most likely a problem with the carburetor, because we know we have a spark for the spark plug, we know we have fuel, and I can smell fuel, so I know it's getting fuel. And obviously there's not even an air filter on there, so we know it's getting air, but there's probably some jet that's clogged in the carburetor, so we're gonna take it off and then we're gonna look at it and see if we can find any dirt or gunk, because this mower was stored with gas with ethanol in it, and so it's probably clogged somewhere. So here is where our air filter goes. This is the intake to the carburetor. In most instances, the carburetor is directly located behind the air filter. Once you remove the air filter cover, you'll be able to view and remove your carburetor. This carburetor has linkages and a spring connected to the throttle and another linkage attached to the choke. In order to remove these, we will need to turn off the fuel valve and remove our fuel line so we can rotate the carburetor and unlock the Z-like connection of the linkage that attaches to the choke and the throttle. Just to go over the basic carburetor, so here's the intake where the air comes in. Here's where the mixed fuel and air mixture goes into the engine. And this base is a float which controls if there's not enough fuel, it pulls more fuel into the engine. And there's a series of jets inside the carburetor that if they're clogged, they're not going to be spraying fuel where it needs to be, and as much fuel that needs to go into the engine. Before taking apart your carburetor, I'd highly recommend cleaning it off. Not only will this help you see what you're working on, but it'll help prevent dirt from getting into the carburetor and clogging it up, which is the whole reason you're taking it apart in the first place. If you have an old toothbrush, I found that it does a great job at removing the dirt, especially in those hard to reach places. After cleaning it with the brush, you can use canned air, an air compressor, or carburetor cleaner to help remove the remaining dirt. When doing this, I'd highly recommend wearing some safety glasses to help prevent dirt and/or gasoline from getting in your eyes. Now that you've cleaned the exterior of the carburetor, we can take it apart and clean the inside. Start by removing the bottom bolt that holds the float housing on, which is where we'll be using our carburetor cleaner, canned air, or air compressor to clean out any of the debris. In my experience, I found that an air compressor works best. Here there's a pin. When removed, will allow the float to move up. There's only one way that this float can go, and you can see that there is a little device attached to the bottom of it, And what this does is it opens and closes the valve that allows fuel to go in and out of the carburetor. So this little piece just slides in right there. So I'm gonna remove that. I'm gonna set it here, and now I will clean the float and any dirt that can clog up any ports. Here you can see that the base of the carburetor has a lot of grit and debris on it. So we'll go ahead and clean that up. You can use a toothbrush or even carburetor cleaner to get it out. Do your best to get the carburetor completely clean, that way you don't have to repeat this process. A lot of times when a carburetor is not functioning properly, this port is the culprit. You can use a flathead screwdriver to remove that little port, keeping in mind that it's a softer metal, so take care not to strip it out when removing it by using the wrong screwdriver. This piece typically won't back out with just a screwdriver, so once you feel like it won't unscrew any further, you can turn the carburetor right side up, tap the carburetor on your hand to help remove this piece. Once it's removed, you should be able to see clearly through the piece. If not, use your compressed air or your carburetor cleaner to clear the port. We're going to spray here, and we're going to spray here to make sure that the fuel is getting into the float, and then we'll spray here as well. Every carburetor is a little different, but at the same time, they're all incredibly similar. Every carburetor has tiny holes that enables the engine to have the correct fuel to air ratio so that it runs properly. It's key to find any and all holes and blow through them several times to ensure that the ports are clear of all debris. The way every carburetor works, as the throttle opens up, it allows more air and fuel into the engine to burn. Near the throttle valve, you'll see 3, maybe 4 tiny little holes that allow fuel and air to have the correct mixture in the carburetor. You can use either a piece of wire or maybe even fishing line to poke in there, and then use your compressed air to be able to shoot it and make sure all of those are clean to allow for the right fuel to air ratio. Here I unwound picture frame wire, and it was able to fit in the holes perfectly to make sure that they were clear. As we prepare to reassemble the carburetor, I'm cleaning off this last piece with a soft wire brush, making sure to go with the threads so as not to mess up the threading. When screwing this piece back into the carburetor, make sure it's snug, but don't over tighten it because, as I stated earlier, it's a soft metal. Next, we'll finish assembling the carburetor by installing the float valve, the pin, and the bottom of the carburetor. Before reinstalling the carburetor, you want to make sure that everything it comes in contact with is clean so that dirt and debris don't get right back into the system. Once everything is clean, then you can go ahead and reinstall the carburetor. Start with the spring and linkages for the throttle and choke, then you can reconnect the fuel line. Sometimes when you remove the carburetor, a gasket might tear, which happened here, though most times the engine will continue to run fine with a torn gasket. With this particular model, there's a vacuum line attached to the back of the intake housing, which can be reinstalled with a pair of needle nose pliers. Here's the piece that had a torn gasket. Gaskets aren't that expensive, so feel free to order a new one, but mine ran fine with the one that was torn. When tightening everything up, make sure to tighten each bolt a little at a time so that even pressure is applied. Once everything's reinstalled, turn your fuel back on and try and start it. Once you have success with the drill, reinstall the pull start and give it a pull. Alright, now that we know our mower works, we can go ahead and clean it the rest of the way up. I hope that helped y'all get your mower running. If you have any questions, comment below. If you like it, please subscribe. And as always, peace and God bless.